Elaine, thank you so much for coming along and joining me for an episode of the podcast.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
So I always start by asking, how do we know each other?
Well, it was probably about 6 years ago when you posted a really honest and vulnerable reflection on LinkedIn, sharing with people about, the mental health challenges that you had and some insight from them. And I just remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this woman has so much courage, to be a partner at PwC and like this leader in thought sharing such a vulnerable thing. And it just really hit me, the impact that, and you had like so many people comment on it and so many people love it. So, I mean, it clearly resonated with, a collective. And I don't even normally do this, but I just felt, I just felt like I should reach out to you to tell you that the message was really important to me. And I just respected your authenticity and your honesty so much because it was something that, I've struggled with in the past, like being authentic and honest. And I know a big part of this is like behind the profile and, these things that we take on, like we want everybody to think it's perfect and, posting happy pictures and trying to be inspirational and all those things when, it's just part of life that we have challenges. And, I was never really talking about that stuff with people out in the open. And the fact that you could do that. And I just saw you as such a accomplished woman being so honest. It just kind of gave me the strength to think about, how sharing my story could be helpful to people. And as you know, I'm writing a book right now and it's been quite a process. You've been so supportive with it. And I remember you reading my first draft and just also the way women show up for each other, and how important that is. And we didn't even know each other, but you really showed up for me. And I'm sure you showed up for a lot of people. And I'm sure your honesty made an impact on so many people that you probably don't even know. So I just, was so impressed and affected by your honesty in it. And it really did make me think about how I show up. And all these things, I've realized all these things happen for us, right? I mean, we have all these different experiences that we really can use to help others. And when we come through something really hard, like clinical depression, which, I've struggled with too, we really can help other people. And that's really what it's all about. It's not about all the achievement and the titles and the who did you work for and what did you do and how many followers do you have and all that stuff. It's really realizing that, we came here with like a mission and figuring that out. And I think that part of figuring that out is, looking at the ways that we communicate our struggles because we all have them. So anyway, I'm so grateful for your friendship and just your honesty put me on a path that I'm just really grateful for. And it's helped me think about my values and my priorities. And, I think they were a little off balance for most of my career. So you've just been a really great example for me of what can happen when you share your most authentic self. So thank you for that.
And Elaine, thank you for that. When I think about our first meeting, it was like this. It was a phone call. We didn't even have a video call, which now it seems like they're ubiquitous. I love that we are, in a sense, reaching back to the beginning of our friendship now, having this conversation with video off, just our voices, and having to truly listen to each other. Because that was how I remember our first meeting. I remember how deeply you listened. And more than that, I felt heard by you. And as you said, it really has blossomed. And you have been such an important person for me, especially introducing me to Ann Dowsett Johnston, our mutual writing coach. and then encouraging me to take Anne's writing courses. First writing your recovery. And that was transformative for me. I have written my whole life, but I'd never really thought of myself as a writer. And studying with Anne and being able to share my work with you, and then you so graciously sharing your work with me, it created this whole new space that I didn't have before for self-expression.
Mm.
And how much I have come to love the written word even more than I did before, and how valuable a skill writing has become for me as a way to process what happens in my own mind. I I love hearing about your writing process and what you have been working on. So, where is the book right now, and how has that journey been for you?
Well, first I want to say that, yeah, I never really thought of myself as a writer, and I wasn't a very good writer when I started this. I always knew I was going to write a book because, my story is pretty unique. I know a lot of people feel that way, and everybody's story is unique, but the book is really about the psychological impacts on biological children in these large adoptive multiracial families. And I didn't really feel like I could start writing it until my mother passed away. And so when we connected, that had just happened like 6 months prior. And, I quit my job and I decided like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I just started doing it. And Anne was a wonderful mentor. She still is. And I'm so glad that you found that freedom in your writing too. But I think, we always think that, well, let me just speak for, I have always reached outside myself for, the gratification or to feel better or whatever. And whether it was shopping or titles or, who I was working for or whatever. One of the biggest first lessons that I really found from my writing was that I never felt very important. So I always would, overachieve and overwork and overgive to be recognized. And I think that's one of the first things that came out in my writing. And, over the years, I mean, I've done like 3 drafts of this and it just keeps getting more and more, like more is being revealed from my writing. And, over the past couple years, I've had lots of different contracts and different experiences and they've all taught me things. And sometimes they've been really hard. Like I've gotten clobbered because of my lack of boundaries and, this kind of self-abandonment thing that happens when you put, a big company or a boss or a whatever in front of your own needs. So I think that's how writing has helped me the most. My husband and I moved to Mexico a little while ago and I just kind of stopped working in the other, traditional ways. And I've just been super focused on this. And what's fascinating to me is that, a lot of times I'll think I'm going to write about one thing and it will go in a totally different direction. I don't know if you've had that experience. And I always say a little prayer before I start like a serious writing session. And I swear it works. I don't know how it works, but just things that I didn't even think of just kind of flow out onto the page. And it's almost like I'm not even writing it. And that is really a process of surrender, I think, more than anything else. And I do believe that, we do have all the answers inside of us. But for me, I created so much noise, with all the other stuff that my nervous system was dysregulated most of my life. And I didn't even realize it. And so now I really do have a practice, like before I start writing, to ground myself and to, regulate my nervous system so that it can flow out and flow through me in a very different way. Like when I first started writing, I feel like I was trying to impress someone. I didn't even know who. It wasn't like totally honest. It wasn't coming from a place of like, deep inside myself. And, I'm a big fan of the Hoffman process and, it really changed my life. And it was one of the, I did it when I was 47. And I think that was kind of the first time that I realized that, we really are a quadrinity with an emotional self or inner child, some people call that, and an intellectual self and a spiritual self and then a body. And I realized like my intellectual self has been running the show most of my life. And, that's where my depression came from because I really did. I had like self-abandonment. I don't think I didn't realize that until pretty recently. And writing allows me not to abandon myself. Like it's me and all these other parts of me kind of coming together to be honest, to really look at this stuff privately. I mean, I'm a big fan of therapy. I love my therapist and I'm so grateful for her, but she really helps me see that like I have the answers. She doesn't tell me what the problem was or anything like that. And then, you also know that I've, over the past couple years had incredible experiences with working with a shaman and doing plant medicine ceremonies. And it's such a reverent thing with so many intentions. And, psychedelics are fascinating for so many reasons, but no one can deny, and the research supports that so many of us have untreated childhood trauma that we've never really looked at. And so the beautiful thing about psychedelics is that it can take you back to those traumatic events so that you process them. And then you can kind of move forward with that through integration. And I want to say, like, I think the most important piece with that modality is working with a very qualified person who can help you kind of navigate, the intention before you go into it. And then you have this amazing experience. And then it's a lot of integration about what came up. So for me, those ceremonies and breath work and cold plunging and all of those things, really allowed me to look at these things that I had never looked at before. And when you and I met, I think I was 50. So I was just entering midlife. And one of the things that I think about a lot right now is, what do I want the second half of my life to look like? With all these different experiences that I've had, like where can I contribute in a really unique way with, the wisdom that I've accumulated from all of these different experiences and failures, right? And joyful experiences. And so all of these things together really have, I tie it up in a bow with my writing. And it really does. When I'm in a good place and I'm at my house in Colorado right now, like sitting in the middle of the forest, we have a house in the mountains, and I write so differently when I'm in nature. So I think that's another big part of it that, I believe that our only true mother is the earth and that we can regenerate ourselves. And, there's such a quiet reverence about sitting up against a tree and putting my hands in the soil and connecting. And I've journaled, for hours sitting on one of the boulders on our land. And again, it's almost like I'm not even writing this, like something's coming through me. But I think the writing for me is the vehicle. And it's taken me out of painful places and really helped me to be able to look at things in a different way. So I'm so grateful for writing, and the more you do it, the more you improve. I mean, that's the thing too. It is, I don't think for me, it's not like an instant gratification. I mean, sometimes it takes a little while, but it is me and my, spiritual self, whatever you want to call it. Some people call it faith. Some people call it, connecting in with the universe. I mean, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. There is something inside all of us that is a light, that is our soul's purpose. And for me, writing just helps me understand, what that could be and explore that in a really unique way. And then, we're talking to trusted friends and a therapist and, all those other things that just kind of helps integrate it. But I truly believe that we have all the answers inside of us. I just think it gets super noisy sometimes. And probably about a year ago, I was really struggling with some stuff, and my husband actually suggested that I get, that I meet with a clinician to really kind of think through, like, what is going on with me. And I did 7 hours of testing. It was probably one of the most profound things I've ever done. I had never had that experience. When I was in my late 20s and my 30s and even my 40s, I would go into these really bad depressions where I literally couldn't get out of bed for, a month. And, you know, in desperation, I would go to these doctors who would see me one time and put me on medication and, never really talk through what the root of the problem was. And, I never really had like a very thoughtful, experience with a clinician with testing and interviews and all of that stuff. And I was officially diagnosed with CPTSD and ADHD, and those two things together. And most women, I think it's important to mention, most women are not diagnosed with ADHD until they're going through menopause. And there hasn't really been a lot of research on this until recently. So I think that's just a really interesting thing of when it typically happens for women. But, getting that diagnosis and really understanding it, and it's become okay to talk about it. I mean, I read this book, What My Bones Know, a couple years ago, and it really, like, it taught me so much. It was like, oh my gosh, like, I've had that feeling, and that's what happens to me. And, I just think and that was written by a woman who was incredibly honest, like you. And the amount of people she's been able to help just by sharing her story. I mean, I think it's so important that we share our stories, because even me saying, like, I was diagnosed with ADHD when I was 54, that could bring hope to someone else who's like, why can't I turn my traffic jam head off? And that they're not alone, because I think that's kind of the scariest part of depression. You have no hope. And you feel so alone and so broken. And, I've been a consultant for 15 years. And the reason I went that path is because I'd have these big jobs and then I would, get triggered. And that was another thing that I learned, like how CPTSD manifests. It's not a mental illness. It comes from prolonged neglect and prolonged trauma in childhood. So I would get triggered by things and not even understand what the trigger was, because I had never really looked at those root causes and I didn't know how. And I went to doctors that didn't look at that. And then that combined with the ADHD, I mean, it can just create like looping with something that was just, it was a trigger, but it was so much deeper than that. And, so getting that diagnosis, I think, really helped me to understand, like, oh, I see what's happening now. And then that combined with, a big part of the book, I mean, my childhood's truly just my street cred. It's not like a victim story, but I mean, you got to kind of talk about what happened in order to understand, like, how to fix it. But one of the things I learned from connecting with a researcher is, in this whole conversation of adoption, there are all kinds of stories shared by adoptees and birth mothers and adoptive mothers. No one's talking about the biological children and how adoption affects them. And I'm not trying to poo-poo adoption, like, at all. But how can we not include that family member in the conversation? And this researcher that I talked to, her research shows really obvious things, like, that the biological child would have people pleasing and parentification and invisibility. All these things make sense. But the biggest thing was that the biological child takes on the vicarious trauma of the adoptees. And my parents adopted 15 kids. So, I was their first, and then they just kind of kept coming at different ages. So my role in the family was bumped all around, in the birth order. And I was just expected to be, totally healthy with everything because I had biological parents. And I don't think my parents didn't know this. This research wasn't available at the time. But when you are taking on the vicarious trauma of all these other people, of course it's going to affect you. this was not really known when I was growing up. So understanding that, I was unknowingly taking on vicarious trauma throughout my whole childhood. And that became a pattern in my adult life. Like, I was a rescuer. Someone needed help. I was there, abandoning myself, putting their emotional needs in front of my own. And how could that not affect you as a person? So that research combined with this incredibly thoughtful diagnosis and my writing, like all of it has been such a game changer. And then on top of that, like connecting with people like you, Liz, who, just really have the courage. I didn't have the courage, I don't think, before I was just trying to be perfect. And I didn't have the courage to really share that stuff because I cared desperately about what people thought about me, but it wasn't authentic. So, I think a lot of women are waking up right now. There's a lot of talk about how, the feminine is really kind of coming into her own. And I've worked in Africa and had the great pleasure of being around just incredible indigenous leaders and wisdom keepers and how we are in this culture even. We don't support each other in the ways that, we kind of need to. And we're all the same. We're all connected. We all come from the same source. We're all experiencing the same things, just in different ways. So, I think authentic friendships that are reciprocal, which you and I have always been reciprocal, and really being discerning about where we're putting our energy and where we're moving forward with friendships that are making us both better instead of going into that pattern of, my husband tells me sometimes, like, you just attract these wounded birds, like you can't help yourself. And I know where that comes from. But, this whole self-abandonment thing, and it's so different and, for everybody, but, it could be like, I hate my job, but I'm just going to keep going, even though I know it's, I'm throwing up every morning, right? I mean, or, I'm going out there and helping these people that I barely know just to like prove my own self-worth. I mean, there's so many ways that we do it, but I think getting really kind of quiet with things and listening to that inner voice and being with people that are on our path. I always like to play with people that are better than me because it makes me better. And I don't even know that that's fair to say. It's like, but they are better than me in some ways. And then I have experience too, and it's valuable. So, I think we are coming into this place with women especially who are finding their voice because of leaders like you and hopefully the kind of leader that I'll be, and really kind of providing this place where we can all heal together. And I think writing is just one of the most perfect ways to do that. One of the things, I'm sorry that I'm like rambling, but one of the things I love about Anne is that, she's very thoughtful about who is in her writing cohorts and how different these women's stories are. And when you're talking about recovery, I mean, it takes a certain kind of person to do any kind of recovery work. You have to be kind of self-aware. So bringing these groups together that have this mutual interest in healing themselves, and it really does heal the collective because, again, we all struggle with the same things at the core. And, the way that she guides her readers and her writers and supports her writers, it really does. It like unfolds a mystery almost that makes you want to keep going. So, yeah, I totally agree with you. Anne was an angel. I mean, she fell into my life like so unexpectedly and really kind of got me on the writing journey, which has really served me a lot.
And then in turn, you were that angel that fell into my life and got me on that path.
Oh, you were on your way. You were on your way.
Elaine, as I listen to you, and so many pearls fall out of that, writing allows me not to abandon myself. That hit me. That the way that you express yourself through words is profound. You talk about turning off the traffic jam in your head. And as I listen to you talk about your life and your experience and the book, the theme that comes out for me is exploration and journey. And what I've always appreciated about our conversations and our relationship is that you are fearless in your own journey. You go where the story takes you, and you are open to learning at every step and every stage, and you're open to who you can learn from. You find ways to learn from everyone you encounter and to make meaning and take meaning out of each of these experiences that you have. And I'm curious, what has surprised you along this journey of writing your book? Because something that you noted, you were writing what wants to be written, not necessarily what you thought you wanted to write. And that resonates for me so much because when I first started writing courses with Anne, I thought I was going to be writing a book about depression and recovery from depression. And that is not the story that wanted to be told. And when my own book comes to see the light of day, and I believe that it will, it's not anytime soon, but I am on that journey. It is the story that needs to be told and the story that wants to be told. As you said, I have also spent my life chasing a false notion of what perfection is. And I think through writing, we are able to let go of other people's sense of our stories and tell them for ourselves. And I'm just so curious, as you've gone through this journey, what has surprised you?
Hmm. Well, I'll tell you a recent thing that surprised me. So I'm at the place now with my book, and it's been 6 years. And I didn't even really know what the process could look like or what it was. I mean, I just kept writing, and I took breaks and did more work. And I actually remember, one of the ayahuasca ceremonies that I did, my intent, I felt really blocked and it just wasn't flowing. And then I started beating myself up, like, why can't I do this? And I remember when I kind of came out of the medicine, and that's when things kind of like, you're in this space of like, what the heck just happened? Like, what was that all about? And I went and sat someplace quietly by myself and just said, like, what is happening? Like, why can't I do that? Why am I so stuck? And the medicine told me, like, the book is still writing itself. Relax. And so it takes what it takes, and more is revealed all the time. And the book I would have written 5 years ago is so much different from the book I'm writing now. I think I started in such a victim place and I was angry. And I actually had an agent tell me that. Like, she said there's three reasons that a book does well. Number one, it's a celebrity and everybody wants to know their business. Number two, it's an extraordinary story. And number three, it's a really good writer. Yours falls into extraordinary story, but like, you need to work on your anger. And I didn't really understand that at the time. I mean, I didn't know how much, and I'm going to go to a step further and say rage. And then as I continued writing and just getting this, working with this medicine and this amazing man from Colombia who just handles everything with so much care, he taught me how to breathe. I don't think I really ever knew how to breathe before I started doing this work. But, that has been my experience, that like more is revealed, and when it's time, it's time. And, you know, that kind of trauma does take a while to unpack. I didn't start unpacking my stuff until I did Hoffman. And it's truly the first time I was seen. So, and it is a process. Healing it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. And so I was writing probably about 3 weeks ago. And this goes back to like, it turns into something that you're like, whoa. And I was writing about my first marriage. And I really wanted to be respectful about that marriage. And I actually wasn't even going to write about it. I mean, other than the fact that, one of my worst depressions happened 6 months after I left my husband, when I realized, like, who am I now? Like, if I'm not, and he was a political pundit, and I showed up as like the perfect Republican wife, and, privately I couldn't even breathe because I wasn't being true to myself. I mean, I was just playing a role. I wore so many masks, for most of my adult life. And I started writing. I don't even know if it'll be in the book. I'm not sure. Maybe the whole purpose was that, I would see this, but, in this marriage, like, my truth is that I knew when I was walking down the aisle that I was not in love with this person. I loved him. He provided structure for me that I had never had. I knew he would never cheat on me. I knew he had integrity. He's one of the smartest people I've ever known. And we were together for 10 years, which is a testament, I think, to our friendship. But the bottom line is he made me feel important. And I was sitting at tables that, like, I remember when I was writing this, I was like, how did a girl who came from what I came from end up at $1,000 a plate gala, dancing with the director of the CIA and sitting at a table with cabinet members? Like, how did that happen? I mean, I was living in DC. How did that happen? And they think I'm interesting, like, whoa. And I really liked that feeling. And I don't even, I didn't consciously do it, but I was 32. He was such a good guy. He really adored me. And it just felt like the time. And, at the time, I didn't have a good marriage modeled for me. I mean, my parents were a dumpster fire. I mean, trying to get their own needs met, but I really realized, like, my part in all of that and what was really going on with me. And the writing just went like a totally different direction. And it mirrored for me, how my decisions and my unhealed self kind of like ran the show. And it was a survival thing more than anything else. I mean, it was a survival thing. Like, how am I going to survive? And what do I need to survive? And thinking that it was going to be from something outside myself, I think that was what I hadn't learned how to do yet, or how to differentiate, right? And then another piece that really kind of blew my mind was, a big part of my awakening, as I said, was leaving that marriage. And when I left, I was like, I'm going to do something over the top. And I had always wanted to go to South Africa. And I went on this trip with, like, Martha Beck, who was my neighbor in Phoenix, and just like a renowned life coach. And I thought, Martha's going to heal me. She's going to tell me what direction I need to go in. And, just constantly relying on, like, gurus and, thinking that someone else was going to save me, like, whether it was my husband or, a psychic or a therapist or whatever, right? And I remember during this thing, it was a self-transformation retreat at this amazing place called Londolozi in South Africa. And it was a profound experience. I'm so grateful I got to do it. But she coached people at meals and in front of everyone, because we're all so much alike, and if I hear someone else's story and see how she coaches them, it's going to affect me. And I was the last person. It was like the night before the end. And she said, she said it with such a clear heart. I know she really meant well, but she said, Elaine, I purposely wanted you to be last because I think you're a complicated person. And that put me into, oh my God, I don't want to stand out. I don't want attention. I don't want to, all this stuff. And then I stayed in South Africa for like another month after that. And by the time I was coming home, I knew I was going into a massive depression. And that led to like a whole nother story for another time, but a complete surrender. Like in the desert, in Phoenix, in August at 120 degrees. And I think that is the first time in my life that I ever surrendered and asked for help from whatever that higher power is. And I didn't understand it, but I didn't feel like I had any options. Like, whatever someone was going to throw at me, you know, I was just going to do. And it was the best decision of my life. I mean, I moved back to DC. I met my husband. I reinvented myself. But that is the opening chapter of the book, me leaving my husband and having this experience. And then several things happened, which led me to a psychiatrist in DC that said, there's a lot to unpack here. And that was all about medication. I mean, I was over medicated. I was on the wrong things. I was on things that shouldn't be used together. I mean, you know how the whole mental health thing works. It's a train wreck. So just that is when I started kind of unpacking being with my now husband. He taught me how to love myself. I had never really felt unconditional love before. And then doing Hoffman and then moving to Colorado and moving to the mountains and nature and whatever. But through the writing, I realized that, like, I resented my mother so much. I was so angry at her for so many reasons. And she was a complicated person that at the end of the day just wanted to be loved. And it turned into, a serial adopter, just adopting all these kids thinking that, like, one of them was going to love her enough, and having affairs thinking that, like, one of these men is going to fill that need, not even caring about the destruction that it was creating because she was trying to get her needs met. And I tried so hard to be everything she wasn't. And I realized, because I've actually also written the last chapter, which is interesting because I'm a strategist and I always start out thinking about where do we want to go? Like, what's the final destination? And so I do that. I'm doing that with my book too and writing this last chapter. And what I realized, and it's like, whoa, is that Martha said that I was a very complicated person. I didn't really know what that meant at the time, but my mother was a very complicated person too. And we were both just trying to find our way in different ways, but that we're not that different. And that really helped me to have a totally different level of compassion for her. And like I said, she's been dead for 6 years now, but I'm still carrying around this, resentment. This is it's only hurting me. So I think getting clear about that, and really honoring, like, her pain. And the title of the book is Mercy, because I heard that, I truly believe that my soul's purpose was to come to this life and learn forgiveness. And I heard, I don't even know who said it. It might have been Kristen Neff, that you can't forgive someone without compassion, and you can't have compassion without mercy. And that just really feels right to me. So thinking about, like, compassion for myself, and if I can't do that for myself, how the heck can I do that for anybody else? So compassion and mercy for myself, which allows me to have compassion and mercy for other people, including the biggest villain in my story, my mother.
Something that's just profound for me in that is how your own life journey led to you coming back essentially to the trauma of your childhood related to wanting to be seen and wanting to be loved for you, as opposed to this person you had to construct who would be worthy of love. And now that you're able to put your words and your story, this book, out into the world, giving other people a chance to gain insights from the journey that you've been on, this journey to self-discovery and this journey to loving yourself that, as you say, has been supported by people around you who have loved you. And through their example of how they have loved you, you have been able to find that love and compassion and mercy and forgiveness for yourself, for your younger self, for yourself now, and even into the future, because we all know we're not perfect. And being able to live our own lives with compassion for ourselves. I mean, we are our harshest critics.
Can't give something that you don't have to someone else. I mean, that is one of the most real observations like ever. And we can't expect someone to give us something that they don't know how to give themselves. And just because someone's 50 or 60 or even 70 doesn't mean that they have learned that. And I think that we expect our parents to be, these wise, all-knowing people that are going to guide and protect us. But the reality is they're not perfect people. They have their own trauma. They had their own dysfunctional parents. I'm not a parent, but no one teaches parents how to do what they do. And my mother had me when she was 21. Like, God, if I would have had a kid when I was 21, I would have totally screwed him up. I didn't even know who I was. So, really thinking about the fact that we were born to imperfect people who were born to imperfect people who were born to imperfect people. And that intergenerational trauma cycle is very real. It's epigenetics. People are talking about it all over the place right now. Gabor Mate talks about it. Bruce Lipton was the guy that came up with it. Everybody thought he was a complete loon. But now they are showing that trauma travels through the cells and there is a memory and all those things. It's fascinating stuff. But we're all doing the best we can with the tools we have. That's just true. And I do think everybody wants to be happy. Everybody wants to have a fulfilling life. They just don't know how. And that's part of the journey that literally does not end until we are not on the planet anymore, right? And so one of the biggest things that I've learned is and I learned this in AA, don't quit before the miracle happens. Anything can happen. Tomorrow can be a completely different day. Just keep putting one foot in front of the other, one day at a time. Sometimes for me, it's been 1 minute at a time, but letting people off the hook a little bit.
Starting with ourselves.
Yeah, it has to start with ourselves.
Who do you most want to talk to right now? And what do you need as you take the book forward?
Oh, about the book?
Well, who do you want to talk to? And what help do you need?
Well, the book really is my massive focus right now because I feel like it's time. It's all coming into focus. It's all starting to make sense. It's flowing through me in a way that it never has before. And with memoir, I have right now I'm anticipating it's going to be 25 chapters. I have 16 chapters written. The first chapter and the last chapter I think are kind of the most important and how they're bookended. And so I have all that done. So I'm at the place now where I am seeking a literary agent. I've been advised that, go the traditional route. It will get picked up. In my book proposals that I've done, and I've done 7 of them, there's a place where you have to talk about comparable titles. And as far as I can tell, this book does not exist. There are several books written by adoptees and birth mother, like I said, and adoptive mothers and adopted siblings and all of that. This book is not written. And then on top of it all, there was a lot of religious confusion. I'm Jewish. My mother converted us to being Mormon when I was 8. There was, all this. There's so much crazy in this story. So doing comparable titles, it's well, there's a little bit of educated. There's a little bit of glass castle. There's a little bit of, but it made me realize this is a unique story that has not been told. So, I'm not under any illusion that I'm going to become this best-selling writer or whatever, but I think working with a major publisher will help me get it out there, combined with, being on podcasts and being on panels and, sharing all the wisdom that I've learned from growing up this way. I do think going after traditional publishing is the right way to go. And I've started sending query letters out. I've maybe sent 9 out. I'm being really thoughtful with researching agents. I want the right agent for me who's going to see this as a real opportunity to help other people with a story that really hasn't been told. So that's the process I'm in right now, looking for the right agent. And 2 have gotten back to me. And 1, they both asked for more. And one of them said, she wrote me the most beautiful email. And I was so grateful for it because I think a lot of agents kind of just pass on things and they're busy and I get that. But this agent said, this is a really subjective business. And I think your story is extraordinary. but I don't think I'm the right agent for you. But I have no doubt this is going to get picked up. So keep going. And sometimes you just need that, right? So that's where I am right now. I really want to find the right literary agent. And after a while, a really good friend of mine is Chrissy Tate. She wrote the best-selling memoir called Group, which is hilarious and is super, super honest about her experience in group therapy. And she edited my last proposal and was just so helpful. But she said, like, Elaine, don't give up. I had to send, I think it was she sent over 1,000 query letters until someone picked it up. You just have to trust, keep putting it out there. So, I'm prepared to send out a bunch of query letters. And then if I feel like, you know what, maybe that's not the right path, maybe I will do a hybrid. Maybe I will self-publish. I don't really know. But right now, my focus is finding a literary agent that believes in this story, that believes that it's important. And then also, connecting with the adoption community, serving on panels. I sent a submission to the New York Times, op-ed. I thought Modern Family, this would be or Modern Love, this would be a really unique story. Sending something to HuffPost, thinking about, can I be, a guest poster, or can I submit an essay? So I'm kind of trying to hit it from all angles, and at the same time giving myself, space not to go into this manic work thing that I do sometimes, where I'm just hyper vigilant on whatever. And then my husband doesn't even see me for a week because I'm just so focused on, because that's not healthy either. I mean, I'm trying to stay in the middle and have the balance. But yeah, any opportunity where I can, expand my presence on this topic in a way that's going to help other people, and further along, get me further along in this process. And I believe that this book wants to be born. I really do. There's so much freaking struggle. I've had, one of my friends said writing a book's like giving birth. It's just, you build it and you build it and you go through the morning sickness and all these different things. And then when the day comes and you push, it is super intense. And so, that's kind of where I am right now. I've actually pushed and it's coming. And I know it's going to be beautiful, whatever it is, and letting go of the outcome.
Elaine, would you like to read any of your work?
I was spiraling. Days passed without real food, just coffee, Diet Coke, and cigarettes. I chain smoked, pulling oracle cards as if they might give me an answer, a feeling, or an inspired hunch, maybe some kind of psychic direction. I moved out of my condo when the lease ended. A friend offered her space in Scottsdale while she was on sabbatical. Of course I said yes, but even the simplest decisions felt overwhelming. I traded in my Lexus for a Camry, sold lots of my designer clothes and bags and shoes, and I slept sometimes for 15 to 20 hours a day. My mind was fogged, my body depleted. I looked in the mirror and saw a stranger, gaunt, unkempt, an exhausted shell of a person. Desperate, I remembered the advice of a spiritual counselor I had seen a few times. She suggested that when I felt lost, I should walk the labyrinth at the Franciscan Renewal Center in Phoenix for 7 days in a row, asking for guidance. I never felt that kind of thing was truly needed in the past, that I could talk to God in bed at night. I didn't really need to go anywhere, but this time it was serious and I went. It was August and the center was empty. The parking lot shimmered in the heat. Each day I walked the labyrinth, inward in meditation, outward in reflection, listening for guidance. By the 7th day I was furious. No answers, no change, no direction. I kicked off my flip-flops, sat on the hot, dusty ground. My hair, that had not been washed in over a week, up in a top knot, no makeup or sunblock on my dry skin. My white t-shirt was soaked with sweat. My jean shorts clung to me, and I sobbed.
Thank you so much for taking the time. Thank you for sharing you and your story, and for your friendship, and for all of our conversations to now and all of the ones to come. I'm really grateful for you.
I'm grateful for you too. I'm grateful to be walking the path with you.
Same.